Everyone, my name is Aaron. I think most of you saw me in the opening ceremony just about an hour ago, and then next to me is Technical Sergeant Tony Lukert from the U.S. Space Force and U.S. Air Force. Uh, he's here to sort of tell us a bit about his career and how it relates to your experience as a hacker at MLH events. So, Technical Sergeant, do you want to go ahead and sort of tell us a bit about who you are and your background?
Good morning. I'm Technical Sergeant Lukert. I've been in the Air Force for almost 16 years. I recently switched from the Air Force to the Space Force in March. Yes, the Space Force is a real thing. That's probably my most common response when they see my name tag. I started out in the Kansas City area in 2005, is where I joined in, went to basic really quickly for 6 weeks, and then went to Biloxi, Mississippi for my tech school to become a ground radio technician. While there, I got to experience a little hurricane called Katrina, and got to experience what it was like to be in the Gulf Coast. Did not like that. Um, Promptly moved over to my first duty assignment in Oklahoma City at Tinker Air Force Base with the 3rd Combat Com, where I quickly learned the ins and outs of true electronic engineering. Um, it's something that I had been familiar with before. I went to school before for electronic engineering, and that was something that I really enjoyed doing. But being out in that field, uh, under most of the time simulated fire, being able to think under the terms of pressure was something that helped, really reinforce a lot of the training that I had done. Air Force definitely trains professionals, and by doing that, they instill that that's something that they provide. While I was there, I excelled at my job. I got picked up for a research and development team to help consolidate a lot of our initial communication capabilities from 5 pallets down to a single pallet of equipment. Um, that was a massive undertaking. Uh, we ended up showcasing it during an air show, and a lot of people really, really liked it, and it's actually still in use today through several other agencies. They picked it up and ran with the concept and the idea of it. So it was kind of interesting to see that. Um, After a few years of that, I went to protective communications technician. This is where I worked in tandem with the Secret Service. I did a lot of field work in support of their communication systems. It was a one-off thing, so you had to be a subject matter expert, a professional. You needed to know exactly what you needed, like exactly what needed to be done in a very no-fail mission. It was a lot of fun. Um, After a few years of that, about 3 years, they closed the unit, unfortunately, and I got moved to Andrews Air Force Base out of Maryland, where I worked for the Government Network Operations Center. They did tracking and monitoring of communications for a large fleet of aircraft that are used by VIPs, heads of state, and yeah, even the president of the United States. So having that high level of support for such important people is a lot of weight on your shoulders when trying to balance all of this workload. Um, I found that I was really good at that too, so they kept me on. They promoted me from there, and then I ended up over a couple of years becoming the crew chief for that operations center and ran the entire operations center for about a year. After that, I was promoted to a non-commissioned officer in charge of the Special Airlift Communications Office, where we did the Air Force's only tactical VIP communications um, mission. And what that entails is being able to transfer communication equipment for VIPs, heads of state, into tactical aircraft for them to fly into austere environments in a less than uh, obvious aircraft. You're not going to fly into Iraq with Air Force One. Sorry. So it allows them to go into where they need to go and still do the work that they need to do. That that was a crazy mission. We had all sorts of interesting problems that would come up every day, and you had to come up with solutions on the fly um, because that plane was taking off whether communications worked or not. So if the communications didn't work, that whole mission was almost a wash. Um, After that, I went over and did high frequency global communications shift supervision work. This was it's a global mission that does monitoring of nuclear launch systems, a lot of aircraft recovery, rocket vehicle recovery, like the booster rockets. They do a lot of the work for that behind the scenes, as well as monitoring for aircraft emergencies. So being able to be in that aspect, with all of the additional experience that I had on top of that, I was able to help build on the mission that was there to let the the people who were working the radios and working the satellite systems know, like, this is the whole aspect and the whole big picture of what you're doing, um, and it really helped a lot of people out. After that, I got asked to be a recruiter, so here I am, and
Awesome.
it's been a lot
Um,
of fun.
yeah, no, it sounds like you've been all over, all over the, I guess, I don't want to say spectrum, but you've been through a whole different series of experiences, which is really cool. Um, I guess sort of moving on to like the current, I will kind of jump a bit, I think, into your previous role in the Air Force, but I can give us like a brief overview of like of your current role and like what that actually entails at the Space Force. I realize you only joined 3 months ago now, 4 months ago now. Um,
So my current role in the Space Force is actually to be a recruiter. I was initially hired on by the Space Force to be a radio frequency transmission technician to work on the satellite and radio systems that are used not just by the Space Force, but by all of the DoD as a whole. One of the missions of the Space Force is to defend the cyber domain and the cyber systems of the DoD. Uh, a lot of that's done through satellite systems. It was an old mission of U.S. Space which was under the Air Force, and they moved that over to its own branch. That's what I was initially hired on for to do. Thanks, COVID. Messed up the timing with everything, and now I'm the only Space Force recruiter. So,
I mean, that in its
yeah.
own right is like a physical claim. It's a recruiter that's chartered at all, I guess you could kind of point to. So, I guess sort of jumping. I think you already sort of hit on this, but can you expand a bit more on what made you join the Air Force originally back when you started?
I went to school a little bit. I graduated high school in 2000, and like my folks, I went to school right again after I graduated. Once you graduate high school, go back to college. So that's what I did. I enjoyed tinkering with electronics at an early age, um, and so I went to school for that. Engineering, electronic engineering technology. Um, about the same time I was done with school, I was trying to find a job in the field. Um, the tech bubble was still kind of in the crash state. at least where I was at. And so being able to find a position with a company in that field was extremely difficult without experience. My best friend, shout out to Ryan, he's listening, um, joined the Air Force, and I thought that that was actually a pretty good idea. So I went down and became a plus one, as we like to call it. And I was able to get in on the electrician side, being able to work on electronics and do the engineering and technical work, which is what I wanted to do. So now I have the experience behind it, but I actually really enjoyed my career, which is why I stayed in longer than the 4 years I initially thought I was going.
So not originally to sort of, so you didn't go in wanting to fly planes or anything, but it was the tech side, which I think kind of answered my next question, which was, have you already been always been interested in technology? I think the answer to that's probably a resounding yes, based on what you've told me so far. But so sort of moving into that sort of domain around like technical skills. So you were a ground radio technician meant to go into radio frequency transmission stuff, but didn't. It's like, what are some, like, I guess, the main technical skills you think you've obtained in those roles? Specifically, we want to expand to the other stuff you've been working on previously as well. That would be awesome too.
So in the schooling that I had before I joined, it was about electronic technology. It was about the engineering of circuits and diagrams, and getting the electronic components to do what you want or need them to do. When I got into the Air Force, they said, "Hey, you're going to go be a ground radio technician." I was like, "Cool. What is that?" And they said, "You'll find out." So I went to tech school, and they said, "All right, you kind of know how an electronic system works. Now we're going to be able to take that and have it communicate without any wires." So that really fascinated me. How do you have people communicate without a direct line, which is what I had always thought things, worked before. You pick up the phone. This is kind of pre-cell phone. Pick up the phone off the wall and you talk to somebody who's hardwired, um, you know, thousands of miles away. How do you have a radio that can only go so far do the same thing? And a lot of the techniques and uh, what you call it, proprietary protocols that the government uses in those aspects allows for that technology to work. That's what I really liked about it. Um, some of the really cool things that they also talked about was, you know, digitalizing voice transmissions. Um, Voice is an analog media. It doesn't work in ones and zeros. Um, to get something to go the absolute furthest you could possibly get it to go, you put it into a digital state. Um, and I found that being able to do that was even more interesting. So now you can put it into a digital state. You can put it into any digital media. You can put it into any digital format, um, and the possibilities of being able to um, expand on capabilities was just even more immense. Uh, and that ties into where I jumped into the research and development team. We were able to encapsulate radio traffic and put it onto a computer, um, to the point where they were able to, you could sit down at a laptop and talk to somebody on the other side of the world who had a handheld radio. Um, that was that exceeded the capabilities of that handheld radio by an unknown number fold. You would never be able to do that without this technology. And and that just helped drive my my desire to continue working in this field.
That's awesome. I got sort of a couple things that at least piqued my interest there that you've hit on, right? So you mentioned like digital versus analog. I'm assuming one key benefit of digital as well is you can deal with like encryption and all that sort of stuff. Not sure much you can tell me about there for I'm presuming fairly obvious reasons, but but have you done any research in that sort of space, like a more broader context?
So yeah, encryption is a big network safeguard, and radio is a wireless network. Um, when it when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, it really is. So encryption is easier to accomplish in a digital format. Um, so moving our systems over to more of a digital format and a digital capable radio versus a analog one was an undertaking to begin with. Um, once we were able to digitalize our transmissions, the encryption became an you know it was just done. We were able to use existing encryption technologies without having to modify them too much. Um, a lot of that had to work hand in hand with manufacturers and the actual people in the industry who create the radios. There's several of them, and they're very good at what they do. They've been doing it for a long time. Um, we also had other we also have other methods of uh, protecting our transmissions, um, such as frequency hopping or changing the channel of the radio over a random amount of time. Um, we also had different protocols. So it's all about how you take the analog, pack it into different ones and zeros, and then how those ones and zeros go across um, the airways. It's hard to do, hard to pull that data out of the air if you don't know what that data is.
Mm. That makes I think a lot of sense. So is like sort of in that vein then, is this radio stuff you're doing, is that purely I guess like audio, like people talking, or is you also using radio for other types of data communication as well?
Uh, we use we use radio for everything. Um, your Some of the things I've done out in the field is live video feed over radio, uh, data traffic over radio, able to send emails. Um, there's there's texting that we can do over radio. You can actually get on the internet over radio. It's not exactly the fastest internet in the world. It's probably a lot slower than dial-up, just because the nature of a lot of it has to do with the nature of the frequency. Um,
Mm.
you can only go so fast in the radio aspect. Um, at at different frequencies. As you get up, you're going to get further and further away from voice capabilities and more into data capabilities, to the point where you're running today's new 5G speeds. Um, you're not gonna run voice over that.
Yeah.
Um, and you're gonna get smaller and smaller and smaller as you go up in frequency. So,
Okay. That makes total sense. For those that are watching who don't know what dial-up is, because I realized that stopped being a thing before I was born. That's I guess that predates cable modems. So that's you literally using the internet over your phone, basically, but like the phone bit as opposed to like the data plan bit. I think is the most high-level explanation I can give quickly. The classic like crinkling noise that you would hear on the phone is that's the dial-up stuff. So I guess sort of moving on to a bit more around the radio technician stuff is, so what sort of protective measures would you use to safeguard your network systems in your role that you naturally can tell us about?
I kind of alluded to it earlier. Encryption is probably one of our biggest ones.
Mm.
Mess up the ones and zeros, or even the analog data to the point where it comes over. Uh, Normally, it's just static, undetectable or unreadable data or signals, um, to the point where it's useless to our adversaries or anyone else who's listening in. Um, that's probably our biggest one. Uh,
Mm.
Digitalizing the transmissions to change the protocol essentially to uh, repackage those ones and zeros over the airways is a big one as well. If you don't know the language, then you can't speak it. And then again, frequency hopping, changing those channels, changing the frequency of the radios. You know, you if you can't tune into what you're trying to get, you're not going to get. It's like flipping through the what was the movie? I think it was one of the Naked. This is also dating me. One of the Naked Gun movies where he was changing the channel and it was saying all sorts of crazy stuff over the radio. It's kind of akin to that. Uh, you get some interesting sounds sometimes when you try and listen into it, um, and it it's kind of fun, but at the same time, it's completely useless. Uh, that's a lot of what we use for safeguarding. There's also some other methods that I can't really get into.
That's
So
fair.
yeah.
I guess sort of just because I think I don't know, I'm just hoping I'm not the only person who's curious about this, right? But pre-digital, so when you had to do, I guess, analog, whatever you would do to sort of make it less, make it more secure. Are you familiar? I don't know, again, how far we were into digital when you joined, but do you know any specifics around how we would like protect an analog radio signal as opposed to a digital one?
Uh, I got in almost right at the very end of a lot of the technology that we used pre-digital. Um, a lot of our a lot of our safeguarding of that was done through a method of encryption. Um, I'm sure you've heard of it before. The how we had in World War One, we had, maybe it was two, the Navajo uh, talkers, where they would talk over the radio in that language. Um, that's akin to a method of encryption, because if you can't know what they're talking about, then it's useless again. Um, that's that's some of the methods that we would use pre-digital, uh, just because we every the nature of radio is everyone can listen in on, and so taking those special safeguards is something that you have to do, that you don't necessarily have in a wired format.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's I actually don't think I knew about the Navajo talkers thing, which probably is largely because of when I moved away from the US. It always wasn't covered academically for me. But that's actually, it makes a lot of sense. It's quite cool. So you mentioned like you were in more in research stuff more recently. So can you, I guess specifically, was that you wanting to go into research, or was that you sort of being brought into research? How did you get into those sorts of roles?
So the research and development that I did get to experience was kind of more of a voluntold type uh, situation. My leadership knew that I was a subject matter expert in radio systems, and they said, "Hey, this is a project that we were looking at doing. We want to do." And they said, "Hey, you're going to go be a part of this team. Figure out how to take this radio and put it on a computer." So I got to do a lot of research into how can we pull radio traffic off of a radio, put it into a digital format, and then take that digital format and pull it back out as an analog signal. Audio is an analog signal, so doing that in reverse was also a great challenge. How do you turn the radio on to transmit a digital signal that's actually analog? And that was a lot of the challenge that I got to do. Um, got to go see a whole bunch of people who design radio systems and said, "Hey, how can we put a digital system into this?" The 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 process behind that was a lot of fun. That was about the only research and development part of my career that I have. I did get to work on some other onesie, twosie invention type, uh, sort of fix them up projects, um, but it was more of a research and development role at that point in time, for that package.
I take it's not as simple as just convert an MPEG file into like
No, it's not, because you're using live audio.
Hmm.
So it's more of like how do you take a telephone conversation essentially and put it into a radio, um, especially because radios are one-way traffic. A radio can either transmit or a radio can either receive. So having to do both at the same time, it was a great challenge to do.
So you had to engineer around the issue of if I press the button and someone else presses the button, then no one hears anything. Okay. Um, as like the simplest way of putting it. Um, okay, so I guess what was so sort of in that same sort of R&D sense. What was your experience? I guess doing like around just doing research and development for the Air Force or the Department of Defense.
So a lot of it had to do with finding the existing technology or the existing companies that were familiar with the technology and picking their brain, going out and talking to the actual uh, vendors and engineers, developers of the technology that we ended up using, and seeing if it was viable or being able to be integrated into the package that we were developing. Uh, it took quite a few months to find and source all of the information that we were even looking for to begin with, because this was something that was new. At the time, a lot of people hadn't gone into developing radio systems on a digital format. Um, it's actually pre 9/11. Um, it was after the events of 9/11 that caused a lot of the development of the digital radios due to the uh, issues that they had in the emergency management spectrum, um, with being able to talk to all of the agencies at the same time. So that drove initially the development towards the digital uh, realm, and eventually getting to this to the point where they were able to agree on a digital format. Um, and so, being just a few years into it, there wasn't a whole lot of technology available, and so being able to step into something that was brand new was pretty interesting, to say the least. So,
It sounds pretty cool. So I can assume then you were, not necessarily to some extent at the forefront of a lot of the digital radio transmission stuff that we're using today. And I guess sort of in that vein, either you specifically the teams you're working in, can you tell us about like what kind of massive innovations or inventions or ideas that you had that you created while you were doing that as a ground radio tech?
uh, I'll tell you about my favorite one.
Okay.
Um, in my first unit, I was in a combat comm group. The nature of that group is to do 72-hour worldwide deployment to anywhere in the world, right? Um, our mission was to go out anywhere, set up communications for um, a unit that would come in and build an airfield. So we would need to be able to provide um, computer systems, radio systems, voice systems, all that type of stuff. They added in a couple years after me being there a public address system as well. So being able to notify all of the um, players on the airfield at the same time of, say, an emergency event uh, was something that they identified as a requirement. So they bought this PA system. They said it was really great, and it was. It had its own backup power supply. It was able to, you know, be an all-in-one package where you literally just pushed a button and a tower popped up. The speakers came out and everything like that. It was actually pretty cool. There was a downfall though. It didn't have the ability to be remotely activated. So say in a event where you were unable to actually go out to the PA system, it was unusable. So what I did was used my engineering technology and my experience in how to build circuits and built a voice activated circuit for this PA system. Sat down, designed the schematic, built a PCB, sorry, essentially a breadboard, put all the components together, did a little bit of testing, fixing, troubleshooting, um, and then integrated it into this PA system. Um, and what I did was attach a radio to the circuit, and then the circuit used relays to turn the system on or off. So we would we programmed up one of the radios to be specific for that radio that was tied to the PA system. And so in an emergency situation, somebody at the command center could key that radio up and it would turn the PA system on, and then they could talk over the PA system without ever having to go out there. Um, and that was probably one of my favorite little inventions or projects that I've ever done, um, because it increased the capability of this emergency broadcast system, um, to, in a way that nobody had thought about providing that solution.
Mm. No, that's really cool. Is that sort of, is your solution still being used, or is it, I'm assuming, been like innovated upon in recent years?
The Oh man, that would have been about 14 years ago. Uh,
Mm.
the equipment got sent out to another unit, and I have talked with people who have come from the unit that the equipment got sent out to, and they have said that circuit is still, at the time, still in use for that equipment today. So that is kind of interesting to see how, yeah, they liked it so much they just left it there. Um,
If it ain't
Also
broke,
kind of
don't
cool to
fix it,
see
right?
how robust that circuit was. So
Yeah, no, that's I think, yeah, longevity is never a bad thing, right? Particularly with safety systems and stuff like that. Um, Okay, so I guess sort of another, like, specific to your career, but on a different vein. One of the things that your bio went over was that you monitored space launch vehicle recovery operations. I'm assuming that's definitely piqued my interest. I'm assuming that piqued the interest of others that are watching. So can you tell us a bit more about like what that is, or what that sort of entails?
um so a lot of this stuff was almost pre SpaceX. But essentially what we would do is uh use our global radio systems to help triangulate and use trajectory. There's a huge calculation that goes into it. It's very similar to, how you would see in the movies, how they would see somebody's cell phone and they would triangulate where that cell phone position was using the cell phone towers. It was very similar to that um, aspect. So we would use our radio systems to figure out how the trajectory of one of the boosters or a recovery vehicle would be, and we would help coordinate recovery vehicles um, to go out to where the boosters or the return vehicles would be to recover them. Um, it, there's a lot of math, and it uses ship to shore operations, signal triangulation. Um, it's one of those very math intensive uh, operations.
All right. So that's so not as simple as we've got a GPS ping. Let's go grab it, sort of thing. Um,
No.
okay. No, that sounds pretty cool. So that's not specifically related to your Space Force stuff. That was separate when you were you said pre SpaceX, which was quite a while ago actually. So all right. So I guess because we've got a hackathon audience here. How could you sort of draw like links between your profession and what MLH's hackers are doing at hackathons like Art and Hacks this weekend?
So it's all about the ingenuity, taking a little bit of initiative to see a problem and attempting to fix it. Um, much like what I did with the PA system.
Mm.
You know, it might the way I view hacks is not just from a software standpoint. Sometimes there's a hardware solution that can do what a software solution would do much easier, um, much from a higher proficiency or from a more robust standpoint. Uh, what happens if you turn a computer off and you're trying to get into it? Um, you're just it's done. If there's no power to it, then it doesn't matter. Well, what if you could design a circuit that would turn the computer back on remotely? It's that type of thinking that I feel my career has been about. And so, you know, thinking about that, hacking into not just computer systems, but what about hacking into hardware systems as well? Um, there I feel like it's more than just that, and a lot of the expansion of what you define as a hack can be taken outside of just a software standpoint.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're always pushing here, right? Hardware hacks are always super cool. I personally find tinkering with electronics, despite being personally quite bad at it, I have blown like mains fuses before by accident. So don't have me go wiring things. Um, I will say tinkering with physical stuff is always a lot more fun. I'm more build a computer type than design a circuit board type, but same sort of principles there, I guess, to some extent. Um, so I guess you naturally point out that you started you were originally looking for technical roles before joining the Air Force. So would you say that participating in hackathons could have helped you at earlier stages in your career, and specifically like what kind of ways do you think it would have done that?
Participating in a hackathon earlier in my career, it I think I would have been more steered towards a research and development role within the Air Force. Uh, my role was more like, here's a problem, now fix it, more than how can we improve on on this? How do we exploit this item? How do we prevent this project from being exploited? Um, that that type of scenarios. The Air Force and the Space Force has those projects going on in the background. And I think I would have been more steered towards trying to have my career go that direction versus being from a more of a technician standpoint. Um, I think that's like truly the difference. I don't think that there's outside of that. I don't think there would have been any changes. Within my career. Um, I feel like a lot of what would have gone on in hackathons early in my career, I was kind of exposed to when I went to college before I joined. I already kind of was experienced and knew what I wanted to do within the Air Force before I joined.
Okay. So maybe more of a potentially more of a gateway thing than anything else.
Absolutely.
Right, which is that in its own right a positive thing for especially for people that are here today. And I guess got one kind of last specifically question specific to like your technical experience, which is how have your experiences in training helped you improve as an individual? And this probably links quite a lot to you being a member of the military as well.
So being a military member is a profession. The Air Force hires professionals, and if you're not a professional, we'll turn you into one. Um, so they train and they do a lot of training and a lot of training. Um, I went to school for 9 months before I was a radio technician. It took a long time to learn all of the troubleshooting procedures, techniques, how to install, how to remove, how to identify all of the different components that needed to be looked at, values, how to use test equipment. It's a great undertaking, and it's something that will turn you into a professional. Um, that education is one of the biggest key standpoints from being in the military, uh, from the Air Force side of things, and that goes true for all of our career fields. They all come with an extensive amount of education, experience, um, and that's something that you can't necessarily get by just going to a traditional college alone. Um, Being able to be out in the field that you're working in and gaining that experience is just paramount to being able to be a professional in the field.
Yeah. No, I that sounds spot on. And I'll say from my own personal experiences, right, having done internships and stuff like that, right, industry experience greatly complements the academic experience. It's also very humbling to sort of see what professionals are like when they're in a very much working environment, which I'm sure is something you probably identified as well. Um, so I guess my last big thing, which is where can people find more information about your job or jobs, because you've had a whole host of different things you've done, including being a recruiter, and those sort of similar to it. I guess
Um,
very much
you're
your question that.
Yeah,
Sorry, go
you're the easiest way to find out more information is to go to airforce.com or spaceforce.com um, and go talk to your local recruiter. Um, we're we're not bad people. We're not car salesmen. Um, go 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 just sit down and ask your local recruiter about what jobs are available in the cyber career field, in the electronics career field. um, they it it's more support than you might actually uh, think. There's a lot of jobs out there that um, you're a technician, you're a mechanic. It's not something. like what you would see the Army doing, so to speak. Um, so yeah, just there's a lot of information that's out online. And Air Force and SpaceForce.com are two uh, real big repositories of information to find out more.
Awesome. Yeah, okay. So I don't know if people in the audience have questions, but we do have about 10 minutes for folks who are on stream, who are on chat to ask questions. So feel free to put some in chat. Otherwise, I don't think I have come through the last 40 odd minutes. But I don't know, is there anything that you wanted to highlight about your experiences separately that I haven't already asked you about that people would find valuable?
One of the things that I like to tell people who come into my office, like, what do you do in the Air Force? Was like, you can't really see, but in my office, I actually have quite a few awards and plaques and things like that. And on the other side of the camera, I have two pictures. One of those is me and my wife, and at the time, Vice President Obama and sorry, Vice President Biden and Dr. Biden. And we got to meet them while I was stationed out at Andrews in Maryland. Um, it was all due to just me being in the right place at the right time. And so I have that picture like, hey, I met a president. Um, and being able to say something like that is really kind of cool. That doesn't show up in the job description anywhere. Um, I found out really quickly that uh, the Air Force has um, the ability to do what you want to do. I was able to choose a lot of my career path on my own. I didn't, I wasn't told, I mean, I was told, hey, you're going to go here. But what I did uh, and where I went was a lot of it had to do with what I wanted to do and my goals. Uh, we have many more careers and positions that you can have within the Air Force that are outside of what you would normally see um, just just getting in. We have special duties, have certain careers that have little tiny niches and onesie twosie type positions that you can apply for, um, that just to give you something different. And that was something that I had no idea about until I got in. And it was actually a couple of years after I had been in when someone was like, "Hey, you could go deliver mail for a little while." I didn't even realize that Air Force had people who delivered mail, and I was like, "That's kind of cool." So yeah, there's it. It's much more robust and uh, optional as to what you want to do with your career than I ever thought.
Awesome. No, that sounds really cool. Which I think is probably the message we've been trying to send about the Air Force over the last, when the president of these hackathons is that yeah, that really is super, broad in what hackers and I guess anyone who joins can sort of dip their toes in. I have a question of my own. I don't think I actually entered that, which is what motivated you to join this year the Space Force? Was it originally were you originally interested in joining Space Command and then it moved out, or is that a separate thing?
So it was almost a spur of the moment type um, happening. I had been, working in satellite communications, as it is very akin to radio systems. Um, I was exposed to a lot of the space aspect from the cyber domain realm at a hardware state versus a software state where you're literally just sitting at a computer. No, I'm pointing those satellite dishes. I'm trying to find uh, an eraser in the middle of the sky, so to speak. Um, and when the advertisement came out for RF transmission systems technicians to apply to the Space Force, I was like, this is a once in a lifetime thing. I think I have a really good shot at it. And so I talked to my supervisor and I said, hey, I want to do this. I want to, apply and see if I can get in. Because I think that my experience in my career so far, as well as what talent I do have to offer towards the Space Force, would be beneficial for a new branch. Um, so I applied, and then COVID stuff happened, and then I became a recruiter, and then I got told that I was accepted into the Space Force. So it was kind of a happenstance that way. But I feel like even without it, having that opportunity to just be able to provide the cyber domain experience that I do have uh, to a new branch was enough to have them say, yeah, this guy gets it. We think he would be a great asset to the military. Um, was awesome. So,
Awesome. No, that sounds actually quite cool. If I'm being totally honest. Okay. I don't know if we're going to get any other questions from the audience, and but that said, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you and hearing about your experiences and what you're doing, what you were doing before and what you're doing now, and all of that sense. For those who are watching or interested in learning more, as the technical sergeant pointed out previously, you can learn more at airforce.com or spaceforce.com, as well as if you're in the US, reaching out to your local recruiter as well is a great way to learn more about specific opportunities and stuff like that. That said, that I guess we'll close out this live stream, and we'll catch you with the rest of the hackathon in Discord and on the channel later. Thanks so much, folks, and thanks, Technical Sergeant. I'm going to go ahead and end that now.